Let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like you were chasing someone who was constantly running away emotionally, mentally, even physically? You gave, they withdrew. You texted, they ghosted. You opened your heart and they closed the door. And here you are now, wondering how to make the avoidant think about you like crazy. But the truth is, it's not about chasing them. It's about becoming unforgettable. You see, people with avoidant attachment don't fear you. They fear dependency. They fear losing themselves. They run because you've triggered something deep and unconscious in them. So if you want to stick in their mind like glue, if you want to become the thought they can't escape, you must shift the power back to you. And how do you do that? Let's break it down. Let me tell you something that may feel counterintuitive at first, but it's the most powerful move you can make, especially when dealing with someone who pulls away the moment you lean in. Disappear to reappear. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to interrupt the pattern. You see, most people try to fix emotional distance by doing more texts, more calls, more affection, more proof that they care. But what they don't realize is that with an avoidant person, the more you chase, the more they retreat. It's not because they don't like you. It's because they're wired to protect themselves from feeling engulfed even by love. And here's where the shift happens. When you pull your energy back truly, authentically, you change the entire dynamic. You create space, and space is where the avoidant mind starts to wander. In your presence, they may have felt overwhelmed. But in your absence, that's when they start to think, why haven't I heard from them? Did I lose them? Wait, do I miss them? These questions don't come when you're constantly available. They come when you leave a gap of silence loud enough for your absence to echo. But this isn't just about ghosting or vanishing. It's about intentional detachment. It's about stepping back with grace and strength, not bitterness. You're not disappearing because you're weak or hurt, you're doing it because you understand your worth. You're resetting the energy and the magic. It starts right there. You reclaim your power, you break the cycle. You become the unpredictable variable in their predictable pattern. Suddenly, you're not the one trying to convince them you're enough. You're showing them, without a single word, that you are the prize. And guess what? The avoidant, who once ran from closeness, now starts to feel the quiet pull of your absence. They check your social media. They replay your last conversation. They remember your voice, your energy, your vibe. The distance they once wanted now feels like a void they can't explain. This is how desire is born. Not in the constant pursuit, but in the unexpected silence. Not improving yourself, but in withholding your energy just long enough for them to feel its value. But here's the key: you don't pull back to make them chase. You pull back to come home to yourself, to find your center again, to remember that your value never depended on someone else's recognition. It was always there. And if when they do come back, they won't be returning to the same version of you. They'll be facing someone stronger, wiser, more grounded, and that version of you, unforgettable. Now that you've pulled back and created space, the next step is to make sure that when they do think of you, it lingers. Because here's the truth: people don't remember everything you said or did, but they never forget how you made them feel. This is where emotional imprints come in. An emotional imprint is like a fingerprint on their nervous system, subtle, invisible, but unforgettable. It's that one moment, that one look, that one inside joke or shared silence that stays with them long after you've left the room. Avoidants struggle with sustained closeness, but they don't forget impact. So if you want to live rent-free in their mind, you have to create moments, not just conversations. I think about it, anyone can send a good morning text or ask how their day was, but not everyone can look someone in the eyes and say something that shakes their inner world. Maybe it's the way you once said, "I see through the walls you put up." Maybe it's the way you laughed at something no one else noticed, or the quiet confidence you had when you didn't fight to stay, but let them go with love. These are emotional hooks, and avoidants, despite their fear of intimacy, feel deeply. That's why they avoid, because closeness touches a wound they've tried to bury. So when you give them a moment that bypasses logic and hits the heart, that sticks. But here's the key: it can't be forced. It has to be real. It has to come from presence, not performance. Be fully there when you're with them. When you speak, mean it. When you touch, be intentional. Even a small act, if done with truth and self-possession, can echo louder than grand gestures. And once you've created that emotional impact, you leave. Not in a dramatic, manipulative way, but in a way that says, "I was fully present, and now I'm fully gone." What you leave behind isn't pressure, it's presence. Now, every time they try to move on, that imprint surfaces. Every new person they meet feels slightly off. Why? Because you were different. You connected without clinging. You saw them, not just their surface. And now your energy follows them like a scent in the air, faint but unforgettable. That's how you become more than a memory. You become a feeling. Now here's where the game truly changes, and not just for them, but for you. Because if you really want to make the avoidant think about you like crazy, you need to glow up with purpose. I'm not talking about just changing your hairstyle or hitting the gym, though those things can help. I'm talking about a full spectrum transformation: mindset, confidence, energy, lifestyle. You don't do it to get a reaction, you do it because you finally remember who the hell you are. Avoidants are wired to be drawn toward what they feel they can't quite reach. So when you elevate, evolve, and start walking like someone who no longer needs to be chosen but chooses themselves first, you create magnetic tension. Your energy shifts from pick me to I already pick me. And trust me, they feel that shift. Even if you're not talking, even if you're not posting for them, even if you're not looking their way, because you're no longer orbiting them. You're in your own lane now, thriving, glowing, growing. You've redirected the emotional energy that once poured into trying to hold their attention, and you've turned it inward. You're building, healing, creating. You're stepping into the version of yourself that doesn't just attract, it compels. You start sharing your life in ways that are natural, not needy. You show joy, passion, peace, not performance. You become the kind of person they never thought you'd become without them. That's what shakes them. That's what stirs their curiosity. Because avoidants don't just miss your presence, they miss your potential, and now they're seeing it realized without them. And here's the beautiful irony: the more you glow up for you, the more invisible threads begin pulling them back to you. Not because you're trying, but because you stop trying. You've become the high-value version of yourself that doesn't settle, doesn't beg, and doesn't chase. Suddenly, their memory of you doesn't match what they see now. You've outgrown their last impression of you. And that disconnect, that's what gets under their skin. They start to wonder, how did they move on so fast? Why do they look happier now? Did I underestimate them? Yes, they did. And now they're starting to realize it in real time. That's how transformation becomes your loudest answer. Not revenge, not silence, but evolution. Now, after you've pulled back, after you've left that emotional imprint, and after you've started glowing up with quiet power, it's time for the most subtle, intoxicating move of all: master-controlled indifference. See, most people make the mistake of thinking they need to be either fully hot or completely cold, but that's not the game. What truly captivates an avoidant isn't extreme emotion. It's emotional control. It's your ability to be present without being needy, to care without clinging, to show warmth without surrendering your center. Controlled indifference isn't apathy. It's not pretending you don't care. It's choosing not to react emotionally just to get a response. It's having the ability to say, I see you, but I don't need to chase you. I'm good either way. That kind of energy, it's rare, it's powerful. Because most people play emotional tug of war. They pull, then retreat, then panic, then reach out again. But when you stop playing, when you stay steady while they're still running emotional marathons in their mind, the contrast shakes them. Suddenly you're not texting first, you're not watching their stories, you're not asking where things stand. And yet you're calm, you're light, you're grounded. You might still cross paths. Maybe they send a "Hey stranger" text. Maybe they like a post. But instead of reacting with excitement or anxiety, you stay centered. You respond with clarity, not craving. You show interest, but never desperation. You're not cold, you're just unavailable for emotional chaos. And that, more than anything, makes you unforgettable. Avoidants are used to people becoming either too intense or too passive. You, on the other hand, operate in the middle, a place that feels safe yet elusive, warm but non-invasive. You're not pushing them away, you're just not chasing anymore, and that makes them question why. Why aren't you chasing them anymore? Why do you seem so okay without them? Did you let go, or did you find someone better? These thoughts aren't just random, they're a byproduct of your emotional discipline. When you master controlled indifference, you shift from being the pursuer to being the enigma. You become the person who can love without losing yourself. And to an avoidant, that is magnetic. It's rare. It's unforgettable. So hold your center, stay calm, respond, don't react. And let your stillness be louder than any words. Now, here's where you flip the script completely, because if you want to truly embed yourself in the mind of someone avoidant, you must connect without clinging. This is where most people lose the plot. They either cut the avoidant off completely or smother them in emotional intensity. But both extremes send the same message: I can't handle your distance, so I'll either disappear or overwhelm you. That's not strength, that's reactivity. What actually gets inside an avoidant's head is calm, secure energy. When you do interact, whether it's by chance, a reply, or a message they send after weeks of silence, you don't come in with weight. You come in with lightness, you smile, you're warm, you're relaxed. Not because you're pretending, but because you actually feel fine. You're not scanning every word for signs, you're not attaching to the outcome. You're simply present, grounded, and unattached to needing anything from them. And that's when the shift happens. Avoidants are used to people trying to pull them closer. They're used to pressure, neediness, expectations wrapped in affection. But when they sense no pressure, just genuine presence, they get confused. In a good way. Because for the first time, someone is offering connection without asking for control. You become a safe space without trying to be one. You're available, not desperate. You're engaging, not demanding. You're interested, not invested in a fantasy. And here's the psychological twist: when someone feels safe without feeling obligated, they're more likely to re-engage. They begin to want to come closer because you're giving them something rare, freedom within connection. So maybe they test the waters, they send a message, they call. They even open up a little. But instead of diving in headfirst, you match their pace. You're not trying to turn a spark into a bonfire overnight. You're letting it unfold effortlessly, organically. This shows deep emotional maturity. And that's something avoidants don't forget, because deep down they crave connection too, they're just terrified of losing themselves in it. And now they've found someone who can meet them with depth without drowning them. You don't. They expect you to lose control when they pull back. You stay centered. They expect tears, ultimatums, confusion. You give peace, power, and silence. That contrast is what creates curiosity. That contrast is what builds regret. It makes them question, why didn't they fight harder? And then immediately question themselves, wait, why am I missing someone I thought I wanted space from? It's because you didn't play their game. You broke the rhythm. You didn't become another line in the same story, you became the plot twist. While others tried to win them over with emotional chaos, you showed up as someone with self-respect so strong it didn't need validation. That's unforgettable. That's rare. That's what makes avoidance spiral internally. You weren't the one texting paragraphs. You were the one living. You weren't the one begging for answers. You were the one becoming the answer to your own life. You didn't get stuck in their inconsistency. You rose above it and suddenly you became the one they couldn't categorize, couldn't predict, and now can't stop thinking about. That's the power of contrast. Because while they go back to their usual habits, their usual relationships, their usual patterns, nothing hits quite the same. No one makes them feel what you made them feel. Not because you overwhelmed them, but because you outgrew the role they expected you to play. You left the stage without burning it down in that silence. It's louder than any performance. And now, whether they admit it or not, you live in their memory. Not as someone who chased, but as someone who became unreachable in all the right ways. So here we are at the end of this journey, and perhaps at the beginning of your transformation. What started as a desire to make someone think about you specifically, someone avoidant, has evolved into something much deeper. Because this was never just about getting their attention. It was about reclaiming your own presence, your own power, and your own identity in the face of emotional disconnection. When you stopped chasing and started choosing yourself, you didn't just alter the dynamic, you altered you. And that is the real shift that makes people not just notice but remember. Throughout this process, you've done something extraordinary. You've taken the power of silence and used it not as a weapon, but as a mirror. In that silence, the avoidant was forced to hear what they couldn't hear before, the sound of your absence. And in your absence, they found something far more impactful than words, they found clarity. Because while your presence may have once felt like pressure, your disappearance created space for realization. They started to feel the depth of what they were missing, not because you told them, but because you stopped trying to. Then came the emotional imprint, the moments you shared that didn't just fade into the background. You gave them something real, something rare. And just as they tried to return to emotional safety, you were busy evolving. You began glowing up emotionally, mentally, physically, showing them that you weren't waiting in the shadows. You were becoming the best version of yourself, not for them, but for you. And paradoxically, that's what made you shine brighter in their mind. You became not just someone they once knew, you became someone they might never reach again. Even when communication reopened, you didn't fall back into old patterns. You mastered controlled indifference. You learned to respond without attachment, to be kind without being compliant, to love without losing yourself. You offered connection without clinging. In a world full of people trying too hard to be everything for someone else, you stood as the one who was everything to yourself. That energy, it's magnetic. It's unforgettable. You gave them the rare gift of intimacy without invasion, warmth without pressure, and presence without dependency. And ultimately, you became their contrast. You stood out, not because you shouted louder, but because you silenced your stillness, and your self-worth broke through the noise. You didn't chase, you didn't beg, you evolved. You became the memory that sticks not because of chaos, but because of calm. Not because of neediness, but because of power. And that is how you make someone, especially the avoidant, think about you like crazy. Not with desperation, but with depth, with dignity, and above all, with self-mastery. Thank you for walking this journey with me today. If you've made it this far, it means you're not just looking for answers, you're ready for transformation. You're ready to stop chasing and start becoming. And that shift, that's everything. Remember, your power doesn't lie in how someone else feels about you, it lies in how deeply you know your own worth. Keep showing up for yourself, keep choosing peace over panic, growth over games, and alignment over approval. You're not just someone to be remembered, you're someone who redefines the standard. And anyone who couldn't meet you there, that's their loss and your liberation. Thank you again for your time, your energy, and your heart. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and goodbye for now.